community who may be watching us on television at the moment or catching us later on when you have more time to watch our business meeting. I want to extend to those of you who are in our audience this evening a welcome, and to those of you in the TV audience a welcome. And I also want to take a moment to just share with you very, very briefly, because I know we have a lot to do this evening, a commitment on my part as chair of your regional school committee to do everything that I can within my power, from energy-wise, intelligent-wise, resource-wise, to make these business meetings run as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. I personally believe, and I think I speak for the members of the committee when I say that I believe that we're on the threshold of some truly great achievements forthcoming here in the district. And I believe it is the responsibility, duty, and obligation of all of us, those on the committee here with me this evening, members of the administration and staff, and those of you who are out in the community, to take on that responsibility and that obligation. We may, over the course of the next 9 to 10 months, disagree on many of the details of the various changes that are taking place within the district. But I think in the final analysis, when we look at what the goals are of these efforts, and that is the attainment of equity and equal access for all youngsters to educational opportunities, when it means that all youngsters will be afforded an opportunity to avail themselves of the resources that we have at our hand to maximize their potential and their achievement. I personally believe, and I think I share this view with members of the school committee, that while, again, we may disagree with the details, those two goals are non-negotiable. They should be the objectives for all of us. And I can personally state that I will do my very, very best to lead the committee through that journey in helping the administration and the staff achieve those goals. Thank you. I'd like to ask the members of the committee to look at the agenda and particularly note the times. Yours truly will be relentless in adhering to those times, and so I'm going to give you an opportunity now to review the agenda, look at the amount of time that has been allocated for each of those items, and I will entertain anyone who wants to make a suggestion to the rest of the committee to lengthen the time for any of those items. Does anyone wish to do so? Michael.
Just a quick observation. I don't know if we're going to get to 4 sets of minutes in 5 minutes, but that's it. You're not going to change anything.
I saw another hand. Shabazz, was that yours?
Yes, only in terms of policy review. Well, I changed it now that I see the one on instruction class size. It's the first reading, so that's quite all right. I guess we can probably do that.
Let me comment on that, if I may. The items on the first A, B, and C should take us no more than a couple of minutes, and I will explain why when we get to it. You're correct in that the first reading and the policy for advertising, that might take us a little bit more time, and one of the reasons why I asked the committee if they felt that there would be a need to do so. If the discussion turns in a direction where at that time we think we need more time, we can certainly do so then. I simply want the committee to be aware of the times, and I will, as I say, try to adhere to the bookends here, 7 o'clock start and an 8:35 adjournment. So is there any other suggestions for the agenda? Item 4A will be scratched from the agenda, so that will give us 10 more minutes of time. If there is no further comment on the agenda, then I will move to item C, approval of the minutes. And if there is no objection, I will pronounce the minutes of June 7th to be accepted, approved as presented. Is there any objection? Not hearing any, I will move to approve the minutes of June the 12th as presented unless there are any objections. Not hearing any, I will accept the minutes for June the 13th unless there are any objections as presented.
June 12th.
12th, yeah.
I'm sorry, the 13th, I did the 12th and now I'm on the 13th.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
You missed it.
You want to go back to the 12th?
You want to go back to the 12th, Michael?
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
just two quick things.
Sure.
Item number one, just in terms of nomination for Catherine was vice chair, not chair. And then I got left out in the voting for Shabazz, so just want to get counted as voting for him.
Those noted? Any others, Michael? Any other,
When there are
Shabbat.
typos, we just turn those in maybe to Debbie afterwards. We don't.
I'm sorry?
For cases of typos, we just turn those in,
Deb, is that okay?
or is that not an issue? 'Cause there was like 2 words repeated on the June 7th one, higher.
Yeah, anything like that that
We
doesn't
just-
change the meaning,
I mean,
you just email me or text me.
Any others on the 12th? Those are approved then. On June the 13th, accepted as presented unless there are objections.
The 13th, was that a,
I'm sorry, would you please ask to be recognized, please, Shiva? I'm new at this game, and so
I am too.
I need to maintain my sanity here, so
Sure, no,
you need to help me out on that.
contact with you on the, you said you're on June 13th now?
Yes,
And I'm wondering, was this a executive session that is now being made open? What is this?
this was the meeting that we had at the Amherst Middle School on the healthcare plan.
Okay.
Anne Marie.
It wasn't planned ahead of time for us all to be there, but once there were people there, you had told us about it in the update, and once there were people there, we called it a meeting.
Right, correct. Yeah, we had to put out kind of an emergency.
Well, we were
Request.
told in
Yeah.
advance.
Can I
Yeah,
try?
Yes.
Yeah, we were all invited initially because we had to have a joint meeting with the Amherst Select Board and the Pelham Select Board. Some members could make it, some could not, and we did have to do a little scurrying at the end to get additional members there so that we had a quorum. So if that makes sense.
Any other questions or comments on the 13th? Not hearing any, those are accepted, and we move to the minutes from June the 26th, which was our retreat meeting. I will approve those as presented unless there are objections. Not hearing any, those are approved, and we can move on to announcements and public comment. And before we do that, I was wondering if Superintendent Garrick would introduce the
Yes, I
young
will.
lady who's sitting, I believe, at the end of the 4th row. Yes.
I'd be happy to. I'd like to just take a moment to introduce Dr. Faye Brady, who is our Director of Student Services. This is our regional school committee, and we are thrilled to have Dr. Brady here for all of 6 weeks now, I think. 6 weeks? Yeah. Okay. So welcome,
Welcome.
Dr. Brady.
Didn't mean to embarrass you, but welcome.
She knew I was going to do it anyway.
Announcements. Any from the committee? No. Public comment? Yes. Would you please approach the microphone, state your name, and proceed?
Hi, my name's Abby Jensen. So I'm a resident of Amherst, and I have an elementary school age daughter who's actually in Pelham. So I spoke to you at the last meeting in June about the middle school math, and I had expected to have to come back or feel the need to come back. But I was very disturbed by Principal Jackson's announcement that he's made the decision that there will be one pathway in high school. And he's already made that decision. There will be one. It's not that he's going to review the current ones and decide whether it's wise to have one pathway. No, the decision's already been made. There will be one pathway, whether that's IMP or traditional math or yet some other curriculum to be decided is undetermined. So I was very concerned by that, having gone through the Amherst elementary schools, having suffered through investigations, moved to Pelham partly because of the investigation curriculum, been concerned by the middle school math program, and then to have at the end of that the golden nirvana of high school math program, which I have heard no criticisms really of, that it offers options. You can take IMP or you can go the traditional route. So I'm not in saying which is better. I think options are good. I think both are good. I think IMP has proven to serve students who would do poorly in a traditional track. There's no doubt about that. I think that's what the data shows. So I'd be really concerned if we got rid of IMP and only had traditional. I would equally be concerned if we got rid of the traditional and only had IMP. And I'll get to some specific questions that I hope you will ask Principal Jackson, because I have no voice, right? I have no influence. I have no way of getting this information, but you do, and you represent us as a community. So, here are the questions that I think are really important. And I went back and I watched it again last night, his presentation. So you might want to do the same thing. So it wasn't clear to me why we want to move to 1. It wasn't very well articulated what is the motivation for moving to 1. He mentioned maybe it's something to do with the scheduling. It might be something to do with that it would be nice to have all the faculty in the math department doing the same sort of thing, but it wasn't really clear what is the motivation for changing. I think that's the heart of the question. Why would we do such a radical change? He also said we'll examine them and hold them up against the Common Core standards. That's fine. However, the Common Core standards, if you looked at those, are rather subjective. Right? I think anybody could look at either one of those curricula and say, oh, that meets the Common Core standards. So who's going to make the decision which meets it best? Because they're already pretty vague definitions. It doesn't say, okay, in 9th grade you're going to do this, in 10th grade you're going to do that. No, it was those habits of thought. You could think about that. So I think it's important to know how many of our current IMP students have taken calculus. So calculus is a gateway to having options straight to college, right? So that is kind of, a big goal. So the question is how many of our current IMP students take calculus? And how many, or you could do it as a percent. That would be nice to do it as a percent of the students that take calculus. What percentage of those were from IMP track? Because if none of them did, that's not very good, right? That indicates that our IMP is not preparing our students well to take calculus, right? So that's an option that is removed for a large number of our students, if that's the case. So how many of our MSAN high schools, the ones that we compare ourselves to, how many of those use only one math pathway? So how radical would we be if we had just one math program in our high school? For example, how radical would it be if we just had IMP? Are there any other high schools in MSAN that just have IMP? I think that's really important to know. So he mentioned an NSF study. I think you ought to ask him to send that to you, because I'm unaware of any NSF study that looked at IMP. All right, there's one very good study that was done in Philadelphia, wasn't funded by NSF as far as I know, but that study definitely showed that those students who would traditionally do poorly in the traditional math pathway did better in IMP, and that's great. What it didn't seek to test, and it didn't test, is did students who would have done well in the traditional track do as well in IMP? They're in the future. That's important to know.
Excuse me, Ms. Jensen.
I have just two more
I've given you
questions.
5 minutes, which
Okay.
is several
I can
minutes long.
email these to you.
Well, I will allow you to finish, but I just
Oh,
want to
okay. Yeah, I
ask
just
you to
have two
bring it.
more.
But I think members of the committee would also appreciate it if you did email them to
okay.
us as well.
Okay.
That would be very helpful.
Okay. One thing, it seems like he wasn't really interested in what the consumer might think of this idea, being the consumers, being the students and their parents. of switching to this? He'd already made the
I'd
decision.
like us not to judge, if I could, what Mr. Jackson's intentions were. I think it's reasonable to ask the questions, but I'm not sure what his intentions were in terms of.
Well, he'd already made the decision.
I
Well,
think.
if
But,
you would,
okay.
please, you said you had some questions.
Okay.
Please pose the questions.
Okay,
and-
so I have
and
one more
then-
question.
Thank you.
And that's it. So our high school rightly prides itself on the number of students that are accepted to elite colleges and universities, and they should be proud of that. So the question is, how would that be impacted if we just had IMP? What do these elite colleges and universities think about IMP when they're considering applicants? Okay, so that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. If you would, please email them to both the superintendent and members of the committee. That would be very helpful. Thank you very much. Any other public comment? If not, then we will move to the superintendent's update.
Okay, I'm going to send this around. I will be brief because some of the committee members have already seen these updates, Pelham and Amherst. So I'll hit a few high points, and then people can take time to read this themselves. So a couple important things to note. First of all is that we were really fortunate to have our new staff in the buildings yesterday and the day before, so it was Friday and Monday. And we had 29 new faculty who had the opportunity to spend the morning with Dr. Cohen and the afternoon with Dr. Brady. So we're able to really have a wonderful beginning to a school year, a welcome into our community, and to be able to be brought into where we are as a district in terms of our teaching and learning, as well as our work with students in special education, students who may have accommodations and specialized instruction provided to them, and what are our core beliefs as a district. So it was a wonderful couple days, one day at the school level and one day at the district level. So I think you'll all be really pleased to meet these new staff. They bring unbelievable skill and lots of energy to our system. So we want to welcome them. Also, we wanted to make sure that the school committee members know that we have our convocation tomorrow morning, so that if people are able to join us, we'd love to see you. 8 o'clock is when we come together at the high school in the auditorium for having coffee and just greeting, and then we start promptly at 8:30. We're done by 9:30. 1 hour, and then back to school. So again, we'd love to recognize you. If you are there, we recognize, your days are very busy with work schedules and such, but if you can make it, we'd love to see you. Also that evening, tomorrow night, is our first day celebration on the Common. Again, it's an opportunity for our community to come together and celebrate the start of a new school year with our students. We have a number of partners who will be having tables around the Common to provide information for families. We will also have our new mobile outreach van, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, on the Common, which will be in place to provide services to families within our community, starting, I think, very soon, which is exciting. It's through a partnership with the town of Amherst and Amherst Outreach, Family Outreach. So we would love for you all to come. It sounds like it's going to be good weather, so we won't have to use our rain location, which would be the high school cafeteria. But again, welcome. It's very low-key, 5:30 to 7, and we're on our way home so kids can get to sleep before the first day. The backpack project, I just want to mention, we have at this point given out over 400 backpacks to families, to students. We partnered with the police department and Holyoke Fire, UMass Police, and Springfield Safe Seats, and they provided 40 booster and car seats for families as well. So it was a really wonderful way for families to have some of those needs met before coming to school. I will skip over our summer interns. So people, I know that you've received an email already about the amazing work that they have provided and the services they provided for our schools this summer, but you can take a look. There's some links there for you to familiarize yourself with our UMass and Amherst College interns. Also, again, I just mentioned briefly that we do have an outreach mobile that it's Family Outreach of Amherst. We had talked for a number of years, actually, to figure out how can we meet the needs of families who may not be connected as closely to the school as we'd like. For a whole host of reasons, we need to really make some stronger connections. So Family Outreach of Amherst was very, very pleased to be able to be offered a van through one of their funding agencies. I believe the funding agency is CHD in Springfield. So they were provided with a van. So now we're partnering together with the health department in Amherst. We're hoping to bring other groups together. We're going to have our staff go and provide some services to families and to children, and I guess create all kinds of opportunities. We're at the beginning stages, but we have the vehicle. So you'll see that on the Common. And then we are having some initiatives brought back into force. One was the Latino Student Achievement Initiative, which was, I guess, initially started in 2006 by Jerry Hockman. And we've had a number of families and staff members who really would like to revitalize this effort, to think about a holistic approach for meeting the needs of our students and families and the number of Latino groups that are represented in our schools. So Dr. Guevara will be leading this group. I know they just had a meeting, I believe, last night, which was well attended, and people were feeling very invigorated to get back together and to really think about some opportunities for us to meet the needs of our children and families. And we've also, when we had Dr. Ferguson here last year, we had some conversations, as we did at the school committee, but also within the community, around how can we make a difference within our sphere of influence, within the public school walls, around closing the gap or proficiency for all. So I'd like to think about how do we move all students forward to achieve at the highest level possible. And right now, as we all know, that we have not fully met that goal. We have students whose needs are not being met to the level that we're comfortable with in our school system. So we've been working on specific interventions and structures within our schools, which you've seen some of with the equity report from Dr. Guevara, and you'll see now that those initiatives are woven throughout the district improvement plan, the draft that I have that will be coming out to the committee shortly for your feedback and input. But also one of the major pieces of this conversation that was raised by the community after Dr. Ferguson and during Dr. Ferguson's presentation is how do we actually engage our students and our staff and our community in a conversation around race specifically, and how do we really help people to come together and have some common understanding, to build stronger relationships, to be able to talk honestly about the topic of race, which is not often a comfortable conversation for people, and how do we confront the barriers that we see in place right now within our schools and within our wider community so that we can really find some common ground and develop some action steps. We've begun these conversations. We're relying on our partners from the 5 colleges and specifically 2 professors from UMass who are expert in having dialogue and are trained specifically to have dialogue with such outcomes. And we will be back in touch with the committee soon about where we may take some steps within student groups, within staff student groups, and then also within the wider community. So I could probably give you a few others, but I think we'll hold on that for now, and you can take a look at this. And the next time we meet, we'll have many, many more updates for you, since we'll be well into a couple weeks into school anyway.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
comments or questions on the part of the committee? Sure. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We'll skip over eliminate rather, excuse me, the budget update and move to the regionalization update. And I'm going to ask Michael to provide us with an update on the business of the board over the last several months. Michael?
Thanks, Kip. So there's a long list of things I'll just go through quickly to give you an update. So the committee is made up of 12 people, 3 from each of the 4 towns, and there's a school committee required from each town. Trevor's on it, Catherine's on it, and Kip is on it. So we're all representing different towns from the school committee perspective. We agreed to break into 3 committees to do some work. So the 3 committees, one is timeline and communications. So sort of what do we have to do through a complex process. There was a vote where we agreed, I believe it was in June perhaps, where If it was decided to go forward, the target date would be to have a new region start operationally July 1st, 2014. So there's no decision that anything would happen, but that's, in terms of planning, we've built a timeline around that. As there's been 2 articles in the paper, and so we're trying to figure out how to communicate out to our different communities separately and also jointly. So that's one. There's a finance committee that's looking at the finances and the implications of what might happen, and educationally, what are the educational considerations. So those are the 3 working committees that are doing a bulk of work, sort of a subset of the full board. Tonight, we actually signed the MOU, and there's 3 parties that are sort of coming together to move the process forward. So the 3 parties are us, the region, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, which is the regional planning body for Pelham and Amherst. Leverett and Shutesbury have the Franklin Council of Governments, which is their regional planning, and all the regional planning commissions have money to look at regionalization, so we're getting staff time and assistance through Pioneer Valley Planning. And then the last one is the board itself, which, similar to the region, is its own legal body. So it's, the MOU basically laid out how those 3 parties would work moving forward, in terms of responsibilities and trying to move this forward. A lot of choreography, but that's a significant step. The importance of having the MOU is the thing that's never happened over the 50 years of repeated conversations. And for people who are sort of new to this, the 4 towns have had this discussion in 1968, 1976, 1992, a few years ago, and now. So in the last 50 years, it comes up every 10 or 15 years. We've never gotten to the place of having a board, so that's significant. And we've never gotten to the place of actually getting hard information from experts. It's always be volunteer driven. So with the MOU, what's enabling us to do, and when we were at the retreat, we were asked to sort of put contingency money aside. One is to get a consultant to help looking at the educational benefits and cohesion and coordination factors, and then the other is finance. So those are sort of on the cusp of rolling out now that the MOU is in place, and we have a mechanism for actually doing that. In terms of what it is we're looking at, we decided, since there are 4 towns, that we would only look at models that involve the 4 towns. There's a couple others that were subsets. And so the 2 models are creating a 4-town pre-K to 12 model, so expanding this region. Or the other one would be creating a pre-K to 6 model, which would be regionalizing the elementary schools. So those are the 2 that are on the table. So when we go to the consultants and say, this is what we'd like you to look at educationally and financially, they're looking at those 2 things. And nothing beyond that, really, because there's enough complexity there. In terms of funding it, there's the money that we put in for contingency, but there's DESE last year had regionalization grants, and none of our 4 towns were eligible because although there was $1 million put aside by the legislature, you had to be a school district that was under foundation. This year, with the new budget language, the $1 million is there, but the restriction for under foundation is taken away. So the grant was announced, or the opportunity was announced about 2 weeks ago. There's a committee that got put in place with representatives from each of the towns. The deadline is September 14th, and so we're going to be working on a draft. And the idea is to sort of bring it back to the committee right before the deadline. Last year, just as a point of interest, there was money left on the table. There was not enough people in the education realm who were looking for regionalization. So one would assume that there's a good shot of funding some of the activities that we need to do. And there's a whole, this grant would go through December of 2012. And then there's another grant that was offered last year that we applied for and did not get that would go through June. So as we roll out, the immediate part really is information gathering. So timeline, just to sort of give you a sense, if the consultants do their work, if we put out the requests for consultants and we get them back, they would probably report back to the regionalization board in late December, early January. So their findings about finance and education would come back in January. What the board is planning on is making a decision by March. And the decision is to proceed or not, and what model to proceed with of those 2. Again, it's not committing us to do anything because in order to have it happen, it's a town vote. But it means, based on the information that the experts have provided, the board would decide that we wanted to go forward. And that would mean building a regional agreement and another lengthy process. Within this, there's going to be definitely points of input and listening to and presenting out to our different communities, both jointly and separately. And we're still discussing how to do that effectively, as well as it's come up in engaging staff as well as residents. Last two things, there is a website that's getting, it's there, it's going to get more information, but it's regionalschoolplanning.com. And I think you can link to it from each town has a link to it, but it's there, it's got some information, and as we get more, it'll be available. And our next meeting, we've been rotating among the elementary schools. So we've been to Crocker Farm, we've been to Wildwood, we've been to Leverett. The next meeting is September 12th, it's going to be in Shutesbury. And that is my update.
Thanks, Michael. Just a comment before I open it up for questions from the committee. As Michael alluded to, the March deadline occurs pretty soon. And the entire timeline is very, very, very tight. And things need to move very quickly. So I'm going to strongly urge any and all of you who are not on the board itself to feel free to attend the board meetings just so you know what's going on, because things are moving quickly and rapidly. And a lot can happen between our meetings that you might want to be aware of and share with your committees, the local school committees. Any comments or questions for Michael from the committee? Rick?
In order to meet the July 2014 date, would the fall 2013 town meetings be the ones where the vote would most likely occur?
Yeah, just to sketch out the timeline a little bit, if there was a decision, big if, but if there was a decision to go forward in March, what that would mean is between March into the spring and the summer, we'd work on developing a regional agreement, which is really the contractual agreement among the parties. And then there's a little back and forth. So DESE wants to see it. We'd want to make sure that they saw it and it was, legally okay and organizationally okay. It would come back, and at that point, it would go to the towns. And the idea is to have fall town meetings. I think we're looking at November of 2013. The reason being is that state law requires that if you're going to regionalize in July of that year, DESE has to see it and approve it by December. So we would need to have town meeting votes. And the vote is different depending upon the configuration. So if we're creating a new region, it's one question to the towns. If we're expanding a region, it's an amendment to this regional agreement potentially.
Shabazz?
Yes, not mentioned in the update, but wishing to give kudos to Jim Lescault and our friends at Amherst Media. I watched this afternoon a very informative program where Catherine, you were on, and the gentleman from the Association of School Committees, regional, that has been involved, just very, very informative. And I commend it to the public when it airs again, if it is airing again, to try to tune in. That'll be a very well-served introduction to these issues, to watch that show.
Thank you, Shabazz. Any other comments or questions for Michael or Catherine or myself?
Or Trevor?
Or Trevor?
Nope, you pretty much summed it up, Mike.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Could I-
Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to mention one thing too, especially when we're coming down to the point of looking at different subcommittees. The people who have been serving on this board and the multiple committees or subcommittees or committees, I can't remember, that they're on, it's been a substantial amount of work, just me watching the number of hours that people have been really building relationships and asking questions and getting questions answers. It's been substantial. So from the community's perspective, I think we all thank you for the time that you've put in. It's been, I know, a lot.
Thank you. Let's move down to item C on the agenda, which is the approval of gifts. There's one item there for approval. May I have a motion, please?
I move to accept the class of 2012 scholarship donation for the class of 2013, a total of $500.
Is there a second?
I second.
Trevor seconds the motion to approve the donation of $500 from the class of 2012. Is there any comment or discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor, please say aye.
I do have a discussion. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yep.
The class of 2012, the past graduating seniors had a fundraiser to put this money aside to go to the class before them. I just want to clarify. After.
I don't know how they raised the funds, but they're gifting some funds to the next year's class.
Is that a student association?
There's a specific account for the class, so those funds would go into that account, and I don't know specifically what they use the funds for.
Each class has a student activities account that they use for various activities through the years. Chances are the class of 2012 just had money left. And
Yeah.
rather than gifting it in some other way, they gifted it to the upcoming class.
Which I'm sure the class of 13 it appreciates greatly.
I second the gift. I just want to make sure I know.
I'm sorry, Trevor, I didn't mean to not recognize you immediately. Any other comments, questions about this motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We move down the agenda to subcommittee reports, and before we do that, we tried to do this several months ago and sort of got partway through, and I think it would be certainly in my best interest kind of keep track of all of this. If the indulgence of the committee, we could start over again and identify who wants to be on various committees, who should be on various committees, who is already on various committees, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to ask you to take a minute to review this list here. I know some of you have already indicated an interest, and please indulge me in asking us to go through this again, hopefully fairly quickly. But take a minute to look this over and consider what you might be interested in working on. I'm going to begin with the very first, I'll just work down the list if that's okay. If you want to indicate an interest, before we do that, on the contract negotiating team, I'm going to ask Maria to make a comment on number 5, and I also have a comment to make about item number 8, the policy subcommittee. So before we start at the top, if we could just do those two items first. Go ahead.
So the contract negotiating team, the regional school system or district usually appoints 3 people who serve on the negotiating when we're going into develop a successor contract. So we will be entering into a new contract negotiations this fall. So, and we, for some of you who are on it, we just kind of finished up our last round last year. So I did want to mention that that is coming up, and it's important that we have members in place. And the timeline for this, which doesn't have to be the same 3, however it might make sense to, we have been fortunate to be working closely with our union membership, our staff, as well as the leadership team to look at the new educator evaluation model. And we have, I think, had substantial work successfully completed, and we're in a very positive place. And we need to enter into negotiations within the few first weeks of September around that. We're in a really good place, and we came to a lot of kind of tentative agreements and understandings. So, but we do need to kind of go through that process because we're ready to implement, and there are items that we need to negotiate first. So I guess when we get down to this point, it has to be a group of people who are able and to kind of jump right in for at least the educator evaluation aspect of negotiations, and then we'll begin in the next few months for a successor contract. So I guess that would just be, when you get down to that point, it's helpful to think about what that means, and there is a, as we're into negotiations, a substantial time commitment, which is important to know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Number 8, we already have a subcommittee that's been working quite a long time already. Myself and Lawrence are already on the committee, and Michael has indicated an interest. I'm going to assume that that's still the case,
Yes.
Michael, is that? That would give us 3, along with Debbie sits in, and Elaine Brighty also is our mastermind behind the screens who does most of the work for us. But I think that would be a sufficient, a good-sized group to work with. Unless someone has a really burning desire to serve on policy, I'll leave it at that. No one indicating a burning desire. We'll move on back up to the top then. The Amherst Educational Foundation. Is there anyone particularly interested in serving? I think we just need one person.
I think just one person
Just
would be
one?
fine.
I think it's just as a liaison.
Yeah,
for
just
your board.
Rick, I think, is
Rick?
expressing an interest.
The Audit Committee? Rick? Anyone else?
I think one is.
I
No.
had
is
a
one enough?
point of order, I
Oh,
think.
go ahead.
To ask what the Clerical Merit Award Committee does, and,
I'll do
that sounds easy, huh?
that. Yeah.
Anne Marie, you were on that last year.
I've done it,
You want to
yeah.
comment on, and respond to that?
You work with Debbie and a staff member to pick out clerical staff and technology staff to be recognized and awarded.
And it's a,
They're I'm
oh,
sorry.
no, please, they're,
Yeah.
They're nominated by, they can be nominated by a colleague, a student, a parent, anyone who feels that there's a clerical or technology staff member who's done an exceptional job through the year.
and it's a one-day commitment.
Right, you meet once, you pick the winners, and
Yeah,
if
I
you're
can see.
available, you get to go to let them know.
Trevor.
Trevor, you interested?
No, I defer.
Oh, you
to
defer
my
to
colleagues.
Okay, so Annie has
Annie,
that one.
is that, are you still okay with that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you.
It's a lifetime appointment.
Yeah, that would be great.
Anyone else for the Audit Subcommittee? I would really like to make sure that, the responsibilities here do get reasonably evenly shared. And so, at some point, I may pull rank and actually appoint people. And I would do so in light of Maria's comment regarding members of the board that are currently serving on the Regional Planning Board and the various subcommittees. That is really time-consuming, and myself, Catherine, Trevor, and Michael are all working on subcommittees in addition to the board. So there are responsibilities and obligations outside these. I just want everyone to be aware of. Lawrence?
Could I get a sense of what the commitment is for the audit subcommittee?
Yeah, I was actually just discussing that with Debbie. I believe that we have to have a representative from each Amherst, Pelham, and region.
What happens, the audit
To sit on
subcommittee
this.
meets with the auditor when they complete an audit of the region, Amherst or Pelham,
Yeah.
which they do on a very regular basis. Traditionally, at least for the past several years, it's been the chair of each committee. It doesn't have to be. But I do think we need one from each.
Which has also been our budget subcommittee members. So they've
Right.
served kind of dual roles there,
Right.
which has been Debbie
Makes sense.
Gould, Rick,
Right.
And Irv.
and Irv was. But we could use another member, though.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
Ann,
question?
I'm sorry. Annie.
Does Debbie serve on that now so she's on the audit, or is she on budget? Because she's chair of Pelham.
I would say yes to both, because she's heard both over the past few years, and I haven't heard that she would disagree with that. So we'll put her on, and then she can disagree if she'd like.
If I may, with Rick volunteering and myself as chair, and Deb, that's 3, which would be sufficient. And then on the budget subcommittee with myself and Debbie, we would need one more.
And I would put,
Rick?
sorry,
I'm volunteering for that one.
and
Excuse me?
Shabazz.
I was volunteering for
I'm
budget.
so, okay. Thank you.
Great.
Do we need 4, or can we have an alternate?
I think
in case-
4's fine.
4's fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It's plenty of
On the
work.
negotiating team, it should be myself. Catherine, you've already indicated an interest. We could do one more person. And in following up on what Maria said, this is a good learning opportunity to do it in a context that's less than contentious. And so I would encourage anyone who's interested to think not only about the teacher evaluation piece, but using that as a stepping stone, a learning stepping stone to staying involved with negotiations as they commence in October or November. It would be very helpful to learn in a less than difficult setting.
Yeah, it's a very it's a positive way to enter.
I'm not volunteering, I just have a question.
Sure.
What are the 4 units?
The
Teachers,
teachers,
clerical,
paraprofessional,
and
and
AFSCME.
AFSCME.
But AFSCME's
already finished. right?
already finished.
Well,
Well,
Sort
for
close.
now.
and
so that
then there's
includes
I'm sorry.
the region and then the 2 elementary districts?
The region negotiates for all 3. For region, it's one contract for the 3 entities
Okay.
per group.
Got it.
It's a kind of commitment that, not necessarily every week, but when there are meetings, they could be lengthy.
Yeah,
And I will attest to that.
And sudden,
yeah.
And
So
sudden and lengthy.
Rick?
Are they in the middle of the day or at the
They
end?
can be in the
They
middle
can
of
be
the
in the
day,
middle of the day.
depending, but yeah, after school.
After school. No, teachers,
We did do it with just, well, no, Annie was there. I mean,
It was 3.
they're mostly.
Seems like
it's
3:30
rare
to
that teachers are
5:30.
going to be let out during the school day, so it's going to be at the earliest after school, late afternoon. I'm going to ask, I don't want to belabor the point, but we could use one person, and I'm going to leave that vacant for the moment. Trevor, are you?
I was gonna make a motion to leave blank, create a blank and come
Well,
back.
I'm going to exercise some discretion, just leave it blank.
Yeah.
And if anyone has an interest, please let me know ASAP. Otherwise, I will appoint someone. And I'd rather have someone who's willing to do it than someone who's dragged kicking and screaming doing it. That's not pleasant either. Assistant principals?
I would suggest it's the same team.
Same team.
It's typically a very quick process, and often it's not a lot of time, typically.
Number 7, I'll choose to be the delegate. Is that okay?
First,
On the policy we've already talked about, professional leave request. Maria, I'm going to defer to you and Debbie on how many people that involves and how often they meet.
really, we had one.
It usually is just one person. The only reason, there are years you don't meet at all if you don't get any,
Should we leave it open for now?
requests.
I suggest it be the chairs, depending on where the request is coming from. If it's a Pelham request, it would be the Pelham chair. If it's an Amherst chair, it would be the.
Yeah.
So I would suggest it's just the chairs, and then we let you know, and it would come in front of the committee for discussion anyway.
I would volunteer for it if it's, sometime.
We'll let you know.
Absolutely. Yeah,
The professional leave request, so.
great. So let's put Trevor.
Catherine, I'm going to assume that you would want to do those during a regular Amherst meeting,
Yeah,
3 meeting ones?
yes.
Rick?
Should the representative to the collaborative be on this list? or
Yes,
not?
it should be. And I
yes.
thought that was.
Thank you,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, it should be.
I was already going as a member of from the region, so,
And we needed a Pelham and we
need
needed
a
an
Pelham and a-
Amherst.
and
And I
a
think Trevor
Amherst.
expressed interest for.
Trevor from Pelham?
And Shabazz, I think, is expressing interest for Amherst.
Shabazz, yes?
Yes.
Okay, the first meeting of the year is next Wednesday at 6 o'clock at the Collaborative on Hawley Street in Northampton. And it's the kind of meeting that getting a quorum has been a persistent challenge for the Collaborative, and so please make every effort to attend, and if you can't, let them know as soon as possible that you can't. You will receive, once we identify you at that first meeting, they'll put you on their listserv, and you'll get notices of meetings, but getting quorums is very, very difficult and challenging, and they do good work, and we need to be as supportive as we can of it, and certainly Amherst benefits from the work that they do. Thank you very much for your patience on that. I realize it took a little bit of time to do so. A number of you have not indicated an interest, and you just may be hearing from me over the course of the next couple of days. Thank you very, very much. Moving on to policy review. I must ask for your forgiveness in not finding policies EBCA, JLC, and JJIF in your packet. It's an oversight, but easily remedied by the fact that these are items that the policy subcommittee worked on over the summer in kind of an emergency meeting, if you will, because they have to be approved by the 1st of September by law. These are changes in these policies that were necessitated by legislative action, and we have to do it. Just for your information, in policy EBCA, this is MASC wording based upon the legislation that was passed by the state legislature. JLC, it's the same. It's MASC recommended language changes, again, based upon legislation. JJIF, ditto. The changes are minimal, and they are required, but we must take a vote on them in order to submit the fact that we've approved them by the 1st of September. And I'm going to ask you to take my word for it that there's no hidden agenda here. This is something that we have to do based upon both MASC recommendations as well as legislation. Michael?
Just for clarification, based on my understanding, these are existing policies that were amended.
Correct.
And they all are essentially the same amendment.
Basically the same. Maria?
And we're in very good shape in terms of our compliance with these policies currently, so there's not any surprises here for us as well.
Any other comments or questions? Trevor?
I don't mean to be nitpicky, but I just underlined under JLC, the close to the bottom of the page where it says provisions will be made in all cases of injury or illness involving possible legal or public relations implications. I just thought that was kind of redundant, and we should just, in cases of all injury, be reporting such to the appropriate executive director, not just the ones that might involve legal or public relations implications. I don't know if that was in there because of suggested language, but that just sounds or seems a little cynical, that we'll only do that if it might cause us some embarrassment.
To be honest, I don't know how to respond to that. Yeah.
I could try. I think that what we want to make sure that, because I think this focus is around crisis response, and it's more like larger health issues, because we have a way of documenting illnesses and injuries now, but it's not necessarily reported to the director each time, something like that happens. It has to rise to the level of, a certain level of concern. So I guess
Who's that director?
it would be Dr. Brady, who has oversight of health services.
So without a provision like this, that would mean anytime somebody got a scratch in the schoolyard, Dr. Brady would get a call, somebody.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would read this.
Okay.
I mean, but I don't know if others are reading it differently. That's how I would read this. Because it really is a medical emergency response plan versus, because those subcategories are under that heading versus just a routine reporting of things that happen maybe on the playground or such.
Michael, before let me just see if there's anyone else who hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment on these.
Okay.
Lawrence, and then Michael. Lawrence?
So I just want to make sure I'm clear about this. This ties into what Trevor, would it be better if the word said public health implications rather than public relations implications? Or is
Yeah,
that not-
I mean, I'm not thrilled with public relations, but
I'm just being cynical.
Yeah, that
is
but
what-
That
yeah.
sounds like if it doesn't embarrass us, we're not gonna tell anybody, right?
Yeah, so, I don't know how to change that wording.
Why
Can we just
don't
take out public relations and, I'm sorry.
It doesn't seem like it would be necessary or essential to bring this back to the subcommittee for consideration.
No, I think.
If we could just make a relatively quick cosmetic, well, it's more than cosmetic, excuse me, it's more than cosmetic, I realize that. But if we could make a quick change this evening, that would, anyone have a suggestion, Rick?
Well, one suggestion I was going to make is, since we have to vote these, we could vote them tonight and make sure that at the next meeting, we have in the agenda review for the following meeting to bring these back up if we want to.
Michael, I'm sorry, didn't.
That's fine. I was just gonna say, since they're all amendments, maybe it'd be productive if you know, to point out what what the substantive changes are, so that we're not wordsmithing the whole policy, but if you can call out and say, these are what the changes are, we can just focus on those and potentially move on.
If I understand the sentiment of the committee, it's to bring this one and this one only back, is that correct?
So,
Is that-
I saw.
Committee agree on that? Catherine?
So what, if we do that, what's the implication in terms of this deadline of September 1st?
Well, I think it's, we can vote on this, because the overall intent of the policy
Okay.
is approved. I think we're talking about a very, very minor alteration in the
Okay.
overall policy.
May,
The thrust and the essence of it is not going to be endangered.
may I suggest, Dr. Brady quickly reviewed this, and she would be comfortable saying possible legal or public health implications. So she would think that would be a more appropriate wording, so if people are comfortable.
So can I make a motion
I think
to
Rob's
amend?
Hold off on that, just for a second, please. Are there any other suggested changes to any of those three items? Okay, then I'm going to entertain a motion to accept all three, with the third one amended as noted. Is there such a motion? Rob,
Do I have to make a motion, or can I talk?
you can talk.
First of all, I'm fine with the way it was written initially, and I don't feel it had to come back. I think it's making a point that's okay to make. I want to make the point that I think public health implies something a little bit more specific than we necessarily are looking for in this. Public health usually involves things like epidemiology and larger masses of people, and this is specifically talking about individual incidents that rise to a certain level. Very few of them are going to have public health implications. Some might, communicable issues, but I don't think that's the point that this paragraph's trying to make. So I don't love the term public health, because that's not what this is specifically speaking to. So personally, I would leave it exactly as it is, but that's just my 2 cents on public health.
Point well taken. Is there any comments to that, Shabazz?
As I'm reading it, it's outlining emergency procedures, and it's saying provisions will be made. So you're making provisions for what needs to go to the principal, you're making provisions for what should go to the executive director of education immediately, and I don't know where, it would seem to me that the key issue there are those that have possible legal implications. And if those, and so in terms of the provisions that we need made, I would like, if there is a reason why it just couldn't be possible legal implications, leaving out the 3 words "or public relations."
Catherine?
Well, in terms, I sort of agree with Rob and listening to Shahbaz. I'm now reading public relations as an incident large enough that there needs to be some communication with the community.
Right.
And so Dr. Brady will get involved in order to figure out how best to communicate with the community about whatever the individual incident was. So I would be fine with leaving in public relations with that understanding.
We are sort of at a impasse here. I would still like to entertain a motion. I originally asked for all 3, but if someone would prefer to make a motion that would address perhaps the first 2, and then we could separate the third. Rob?
I can do that. I was going to offer to make a motion to accept this. I feel like the best process to go forward is to make a motion to accept this one as written, and then if someone would like to move to amend it, they can do that, look for a second, look for a vote, that can pass up or down.
Are you speaking about just the third item?
Yeah.
Proceed.
Okay, I move to accept policy JLC as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to accept the policy as written. Is there any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor of passing the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Abstention?
No.
Okay, the vote passes 8-1, correct? Shabazz, I believe,
I have a point of.
just a minute, please. Shabazz? Did you vote against?
I voted against.
Okay. Trevor?
I just have a point of order. If I was to move to amend, would it be before? It would be after it is voted up.
Yes, yeah.
No,
Rob?
It would be before. If you
It
move
would
to-
be before it was
well, move
voted.
to
It's
amend
too
is-
late now.
When it says, is there any discussion, then you raise your hand and move to amend.
It's too late
Yeah.
now. Rob?
I move so quickly.
Rob?
I move to approve policies EBCA and JJIF as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Michael seconded. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstention?
Abstention.
I was-
8 in favor and 1 abstention. Motion passes. Rob?
Nothing. I just
Sure.
forgot to say aye.
Thank you.
We are moving quick.
We, by the time indicated on the original agenda, we have approximately half an hour. With the permission of the board, I would like to devote the next 15 minutes to a discussion of instruction class size. If we need more time, so we can move that. And then the second 15 minutes to the advertising and signage. Is there any objections to that procedure? Okay, then, we have the policy of class size before you. This is the first reading. It would certainly be in the interest of the policy subcommittee to hear the candid concerns, questions, comments of the members of the committee in case we need to make any revisions. So the floor is open to comments, questions, et cetera. Michael?
This is actually not so much a substantive one, but it speaks to just a question I've been thinking about in terms of this body. Under the guidelines, the first part speaks to the elementary school classes. And I understand that there's an efficiency, a temptation for efficiency, because there's a subset which are, voting bodies, which, I actually talked to Kim about, because sometimes in this body we're talking about elementary stuff, and we're really not, even though we're consisting of it, we're really not the body to make those decisions. And so in this case, it seems like it potentially is inappropriate for the regional school committee to approve a policy that's stating something about the elementary school, because we don't have the purview to do it. So even though it's inefficient to have separate ones, so I'm fine if we proceed that way, but I just wanted to point it out, because we really don't have the purview to decide. I mean, you could have a separate vote, but it wouldn't be this body.
Maria?
I just checked in with Debbie too, that Amherst and Pelham did vote the elementary portion of this already, so I don't know if it's just
Right. No, but
responding to yours, that it might just be appropriate too.
yeah, I mean, my sense was if you extracted that part, we could vote on everything that impacts region, but we have no wherewithal to say this is how the elementary school is going to be.
Catherine?
No, I mean,
see.
no, just that we did vote on it, so I agree with you that it's not under the purview of the regional school committee. So I don't know if that changes our
Are there
discussion.
two separate,
True.
this policy, are there two separate policy books for elementary and region?
So region in most cases is the group that decides, unless there's very specific items that really only pertain to elementary. So it could be that region takes this up, but I happen to agree with Michael that it might make sense in this case to really separate the elementary from the secondary, because I think the nature of class size is very different. So typically, region, adopts the policies, and then if it's something that pertains, you could separate it out, but.
Technically, the school policy book includes, it's one book, includes all of the policies for region and elementary, and Pelham for that matter.
Right.
There are policies, not all, but there are policies that explicitly refer to elementary level and/or Pelham. So it's one book that you look at. Rick, I thought I saw you, no?
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with the way we do things, because to me, if the region approves a policy that has elementary stuff in it, it doesn't apply at all to elementary unless elementary votes for it. So the fact that you have to have, for example, an Amherst committee vote to make this policy apply to the Amherst schools, It doesn't mean anything that region votes on it, you know.
That's
Am-
that's what I was gonna say.
Any other comments or questions? You're thinking of something.
Well, so I agree with Rick, but I also don't know that it's, this is the appropriate body to discuss elementary class size. So I'm happy to vote on it as one policy, but I don't know that the secondary region should be discussing elementary.
Well, this is just first reading.
Class
We're not
size.
voting
Right.
on it. So it can go back to the subcommittee and for review and reconsideration. We can bring it back. We can bring the same one back. We can bring a revised one back. So you're not voting on it tonight. This is
Right, no.
This is the
Right, I
time for
understand.
comments, questions, whatever concern. Shabazz?
No, she was
Yeah.
next.
Also, I was just gonna say, I agree that I think that elementary should be a separate policy, not part of the middle school, high school.
Shabazz?
So just wondering how it got on our agenda. Who asked this to be on the regional committee's agenda?
Well, go ahead.
It's my understanding a prior school committee member who's not sitting here now put that on for it to come in front of the committee.
It's been sort of a long process. The discussion around class size started months ago, and the discussion was mostly centered around elementary. Then there was discussion of whether the regional board should talk about class size at the regional level. And it got put back before the policy subcommittee to consider whether something needed to be written about the secondary level and whether there should be discussion at the regional board about secondary class sizes. I think it's the purview of the board, if I'm remembering this correctly, Mr. Bunch, I think it's the purview of the board whether you think you should discuss this or not. It doesn't have to be.
There were also, forgive me, I don't recall exactly how many, but there were also several emails from members of the public requesting that we take a look at this policy. And I think that probably is the genesis, the genesis of the review.
I do believe, though, that most, if not all, of the correspondence from the
Were
community was at the
elementary level.
Yeah.
And then it just became, should the regional committee also have a discussion?
Right.
So it may be that you say, no, we don't need a discussion.
Shabazz?
So I don't know how this affects the red book or how this is arranged. There is material in here that is appropriate for us to read and for us to see, again, the guidelines around middle school classes, the guidelines around high school. But, so I need to know how we look at proceeding if this is to come back for a vote where we're specifically saying we're only voting for the relevant portions for this committee to be looking at, or whether it will come back to us broken out as a separate thing for us to look at.
If I may speak for the policy subcommittee, I think what you're raising are fundamental issues here that probably would be best served by being looked at in a smaller body on the subcommittee level, and then bring back whatever, not decision, but whatever conclusion we reach based upon our smaller group conversation. You've all raised what I think are very legitimate concerns about whether this is even under the purview of the region, but that doesn't mean that the regional committee can't or shouldn't look at class size policy. I don't want to suggest to anyone here that that's something that we should ignore or we can't look at. But it sounds to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression, the committee would like this to go back to the subcommittee and then for reconsideration and then bring back something quote-unquote different. Rob?
I would not like that. I think that we're talking about a problem that would only be a problem if this hadn't already been passed by Pelham and Amherst, or looked like it wouldn't be passed by Pelham and Amherst. Because we decided to create a policy in the first place that included both elementary and middle school and high school, and then that went ahead and was passed by both elementary districts, then I think it creates more of a problem to now try to take items out of this because the elementary districts have already passed this policy. So then the question would be, why did they pass a policy that contains statements about the high school and middle school? So I feel like you know, if we've passed this policy at the elementary level, and now we want to take stuff out at the secondary level, then the elementary level is going to have to go back and create another policy that's elementary only and pass that portion of it.
Michael?
Not to be presumptuous to make a suggestion to the elementary school committees, but on that note, if there is a way for the policy committee to look at languages, so substantially keeps it the same, but somehow puts in something like, you know, where appropriate or whatever, so sort of a nod to one body has purview over some of it and the other, then it would be easy enough for the school committees, for the elementary, just to make a simple amendment and keep the essence of the entire document intact.
Rob, can you respond to, does that meet your
Well, I wanted to
concern?
hear what Debbie had a point.
I was just going to say procedurally, the regional committee votes on policies all the time that affect all three committees. This is sort of just going backwards. The elementaries voted on this policy first because it had risen to a level of concern for the elementary schools, and so they had to move forward. So I'm not sure of the difference between, we're just doing it in a different order.
Let me ask the committee this. Would the members of the committee feel more comfortable, forget the subcommittee for a moment, would the members of the committee feel more comfortable if we simply table this item, give it another couple of weeks' thought on your part, and bring it back to the agenda the next time we meet? Is that something that you would see as more preferable? Shabbat?
I don't know that it necessarily has, it's a first reading, so it's something that we are tabling, and it's in a way, and it comes back to us. So I think the real question is, what's coming back? And it goes back to my question. What I'm hearing now from the additional discussion is, what we basically should be looking to pass is to pass the portion that is relevant to the middle school and high school. That the numbers here, that's not our purview. We're not being asked to render judgment on the portions around the elementary guidelines. But we're asking to whether we agree and we want to make this part of the policy for the district as relevant to the middle and high school class sizes. And if that is the case, and if that's what's going to come back on for second reading and later and more discussion and ultimately a vote, then that's fine. If we understand that that's what we're doing, that's why it's on the agenda, and that's what we'll be expecting to vote up or down the road. If that's what's going to happen, then I'm fine. And the only thing I would say to the subcommittee, that as they look at that, is I wonder if they have queried, we've got one principle back here relevant to this, have you queried them as to is this coming from them in terms of this very kind of broad, vague, give them ultimate flexibility that where they're specifying their preferred maximum and minimum sizes, and they can shut down classes and cancel for low enrollment based on those sizes that they're setting. Is that their desires, that their wish, or is there perhaps language that can be looked at or considered and within the subcommittee that may give a little more definition to what are these preferences, maxima and minima preferences? I'm just wondering where that language is, if that language is being given to us from the school leadership, or if it's something that they've had a chance to give us some information on.
Trevor?
You stole some of my thunder. That's kind of where I was going to go with too, that we have been debating or discussing what to pull out about middle and high school, but when I look at what it says about middle and high school, there's not a lot of meat on these bones. It simply says the guidelines will be made by blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't really specify what the policy is that our guidelines should be. In other words, will our class size be determined by the type of instruction in various departments in the high school? You know, gym, you can have a larger class than in music. In other words, I would imagine that the policy should spell out that, you know, instruction that requires this kind of interaction, the range of students we want in classes like that is this. And another category of instruction, a range of this. So I would hope that when the policy committee comes back to outline what our wish list is for these guidelines, that it's more specific like that, at least giving the public an idea of exactly how the class size is determined.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I think that these types of policies are specifically vague because the ultimate decision of class size is the administration with the superintendent, unless there's budgetary implications. I think what happens is, in the discussion, is where the school committee kind of says, here's the range in which we're comfortable as school committee, but it doesn't kind of drill down to that level because there's so many factors that need to be considered when you're looking at class size. So I think the policies tend to be specifically kind of open-ended because of, who holds that decision-making in the end, but then guidelines can be kind of created at the school level, which then takes into consideration more the desire, I think, of the community, school committee, staff, that sort of thing.
I'd like to bring this, we're going around here in circles a lot, and I'm getting a sense that the committee is not comfortable with what's here. That's clear. But what is not clear is where the committee wants to go. So I'm going to suggest that this just simply come back to the policy subcommittee, take another look at it, bring something back that is as responsive as we can make it to the concerns that have been raised this evening. Is there any concerns that that's not the way the committee wants to go? Michael?
I just had a follow-up question, from what Shabazz was pointing out. Would it come back as a first read again, or as a second read, first vote?
If it were changed, it would be a first read. If it came back the same, it would be a second read.
Mm-hmm. Is there a way to amend what has already been approved by the Pelham and the Amherst school committees so that it would be pertaining just to the elementary school for the elementary vote that we did, and then have the middle school policy and high school separate?
I could be mistaken, but from what I'm hearing from the committee is that they want something that pertains exclusively to the secondary level. That's what I'm hearing, unless
My wonder is that can we change what we've already voted for policy? We can make an amendment to, can Pelham and Amherst, would it make sense to change it? Or
I think
is it too?
we would have to come back with some new language for the elementary then. I don't think that's the intent of the policy subcommittee, nor is it the intent of this group, I don't think. Rob?
I feel like we're creating a mess for no reason here, just for no reason. I feel like we're going round and round in circles, and we've all said we'll just look at this and vote on the portion that affects the middle school and high school, and it's already been approved by the elementary school. My inclination would be to leave it the way it is and vote on it.
I'll entertain a motion, and we'll see where the committee stands.
I make a motion to refer this back to the committee to have,
I didn't recognize you. Rob,
that's what I want to say.
were you ready to make that motion?
I can make a motion,
Please.
but it's not a motion to pass because this is a first reading.
Yep.
So my motion would be, I move that the school committee accept policy, is that IIB or 2B?
It's
IIB as written to be brought back to the school committee for second reading.
Second.
Motion has been made for this policy to come back to the committee for a second reading. Lawrence seconded. Any discussion?
So by this
just-
motion,
Yes.
by this motion, we're telling the subcommittee they can't do anything with this. They just bring it
That's
back to us.
correct. That's correct.
Then I know how I want to
Michael?
vote.
I guess my understanding is not that you can. the
Oh,
whole
that's his
idea-
motion. So
No,
we
no,
just
no,
go
no,
on.
but I'm saying in terms of procedurally, between the first read and the second read, that you can have changes to it, and it comes back based on the conversation.
That's
the
not
whole
the,
intent
that's
was.
not the
That's not his
intent of this motion,
But
though.
that's not his motion.
That's not the intent of this
So
motion.
you got to vote accordingly.
We have to wait till this is.
Trevor?
Can I make a motion to amend?
Sure.
Right, that's all. I didn't get a chance to do it last time.
Sorry,
Didn't get to do that last time.
point of order, was my motion seconded? I missed that.
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So I'd
Trevor,
like to make a
go
motion
ahead.
to amend
Go ahead.
and add language to this that says where appropriate for the prospective committee.
Would you be more specific, please?
I'd like to add language to this that says where it applies to middle school and high school.
Is there a second?
Second.
Michael, second?
Yep.
Everyone understand the amendment?
No.
I know, I
No.
know.
I don't.
Trevor, would you repeat the amendment and state your intent?
So I want to make a motion to amend my colleague Spencer's motion, which is to send this to the committee for it to come back for a second read. And I want what comes back for a second read, instead of being this, to at the very least be where it applies to middle and high school.
So you want that phrase added
I want
where,
that
where appropriate.
where appropriate.
So
And,
can I
Go ahead,
just,
Lawrence.
okay, so I just want a clarifying question. So you want the policy to specifically identify this is elementary and this is secondary? Is that correct?
That's not my wish list. I want the policy to describe where secondary and high school,
Yeah.
I want what is spelled out for elementary, which is spelled out vaguely, but spelled out better than it is for middle school and high school. That these are the this is the range, 17 to 21, 19 to 23. It's not my purview to vote for that in elementary school.
Right.
But I want that same amount of information, what the ranges are and the guidelines for coming up with those ranges, and I want us to vote on that for middle and high school.
Can I just
So
ask the
if it's
follow-up?
gonna be this
Just a minute,
policy,
please.
I want it to be this policy for middle and high school, similar to how the policy reads for elementary school. That's
Just a
how I'm
minute,
trying
please.
to amend the
Thank you,
motion.
Trevor. Lawrence and then Shabazz.
So just a quick question. So if it came back if your amendment passed and it came back, you would envision numbers, basically, number ranges? Is that what you're asking? Because I'm
Yes.
asking only from
Yes.
the policy subcommittee point of view.
Yes, I'm envisioning here in this policy that I'm reading, it talks about the guidelines for elementary and the ranges for elementary school in various grades. But it doesn't do that for middle school and high school. And on this body, I'm to vote on middle school and high school, but I don't have that to vote on.
Yep.
So I'm saying if this comes back, I'd like that to be in it, and I'd like it to be specified that I'm voting on that for
Thank you,
middle school.
thank you. Shabazz?
If I understand the sense, I think I'm hearing the intent, if I understand the sense of it, is you are agreeing with the main motion on the floor, that this should go back to policy subcommittee, but where you're trying to amend it is that the language in the original motion being that it come back as is, as we have it here tonight, it comes back to us that same way. You're asking that that be amended out of it, and basically that the subcommittee have flexibility to consider possible changes to the middle and high school portion of this
Right.
that may then come back to us differently than what we have here tonight.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Spence is asking for it to come back the same way, and I'm amending it and saying, make it come back a little different.
Any other discussion? Ready to vote on the amendment?
We don't have a second.
Second.
Yes, yes, Shabazz seconded. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Amendment's defeated. Back to the original motion. Rob, would I ask you to, would you please restate your motion, please?
I can restate the sense of the motion was that the
Give
regional
it your
school
best
board.
shot.
Regional School Board accepts policy IIB as written to return to the Regional School Board for a second reading.
Any discussion? Shabazz?
So I'm inclined to vote against this in that I'm hearing it as not allowing the subcommittee to take anything from our discussion tonight and to possibly, in consultation with the principals, think about any tweaking of this language for the middle and high school only, that it's saying it's not allowing that to happen in the next policy subcommittee. So that's what I'm hearing is the sense of this and why I would not want that to be the case.
Rick?
I agree with Shabazz, even though I also agree with Rob that I'd probably vote for this policy the way it is now. I just don't like sending it back to the policy subcommittee without them being able to change anything. So I'll probably vote no against this, but I would just say that I like the policy as it is.
Rob?
I would encourage Rick then to maybe vote for it because, again, getting back to the creating a mess, that if they even make small changes, then it's going to have to be re-voted again by the Amherst and Pelham Elementary Board. And I'm guessing we should have never then voted it before it came through the region, but I just don't see a problem with this policy, so it was already approved by elementary and
I'm not necessarily hearing anything particularly new to the conversation, so I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Right.
Motion's defeated. Shabazz?
My reasoning on this is this. I agree with Rob. We have here a document that has been approved by the elementary this was really rose and driven by concerns at the elementary grades. If really our feeling is that we don't need any policy for middle and high school, then I would say, can't we just cut this and vote it back at the Amherst elementary and just change it with nothing for middle and high school? Because essentially what we have here is nothing for middle and high school. It's just general policy language that says they have total control and the school committee has no control. So if it's that kind of thing we want here as a school committee, to basically have no input over what the high school and middle school do in terms of special ed, regular classes, then let's just leave it out of the policy book.
Michael?
Yeah, 3 quick things. One point of clarification, if you can answer at the end of my thing. My understanding would be that amending an existing policy is just a single meeting activity. It's just a majority vote. You don't have to do the 3 sequence. So amending existing policy is not a high bar if that needed to be happening at the elementary. So that's sort of a point of clarification. My feeling is that it's important enough to make some kind of statement about class size. You know, I would support some kind of balance. I mean, I think Maria's correct that policies should be value statements and directional and guidance. And to get a little bit more meat on the bones without being specific is sort of the balance. So I would move that we follow the normal order of things, which is that the policy committee take the feedback from this discussion, use their best judgment, and come back for a second read, first vote with some kind of tweaking based upon what the input is.
Michael, with your approval, I was already going to conclude this discussion by saying that it should come back, it will come back to the policy subcommittee for their reconsideration, and we'll bring something back to you. I think we certainly have discussed this enough this evening. So I think the subcommittee has a pretty good sense, I hope, of the parameters of our conversation as a subcommittee. So unless there are any objections, which I hope I don't hear, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Lengthy, but good discussion nevertheless. We're a little over our initial time period. I don't want to give just 5 minutes to this one. This is pretty important. On the other hand, I'm inclined to, since we are going to try to adhere to the 8:30, that's what you were promised. I'm wondering if the committee wants to continue to discuss this policy this evening, or whether it wants to move it to another evening. Lawrence?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in the spring, I think we gave an initial okay to the Principal Jackson, and the athletic director, Mr. Farrow, to establish some kind of working policy. Is that true?
Yes, yes.
And I just wanted to hear how my vote on this will depend on how the principal feels that seems to be working on the interim.
Well, there's no vote on this.
Oh, not vote,
This
but
is just, we're continuing to discuss it.
Well, my vote on whether or not to discuss it now or defer it.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mark, you have a comment?
Not really.
My guess is to hold it.
So I don't know if was my question clear?
So invite us.
I can put it more specifically. Do you feel a sense of urgency that we discuss this tonight?
Right to the point.
Don't take this personally, but no.
Okay.
Right. And
We won't take that.
Okay, we're meeting
That's good
again in
enough
2
for us,
weeks.
Mark.
We're meeting again in 2
You may
weeks.
have just done your job.
I don't talk about size, but,
So in
so,
2 weeks.
yeah, so we're not even into the school year yet, right?
Mhm.
And so what I would say to you is probably a more appropriate time, speaking, now it's open. So what I would say probably is a time frame, if we came back, once the building is open, fall season is underway, and we have a chance to step out on it with the community in terms of a solicitation, right? Then we would probably have something more substantial to come back and report to you on, right? But I just think not much happened over the summer, so it's a little early right now.
Can you give us a sense of, talking November, December?
Yeah, I would say mid-October would be a reasonable timeframe, right? Because by then, probably what we would be in a position to say is what the initial solicitations look like and whether or not we've gotten any feedback. And what the question I'm really interested in is, because Lawrence referenced the conversation in the spring, what we talked about was
kind of the spirit of the guidelines that we were interested in. I think I made analogies to underwriting and NPR and those kinds of things, which I think are apt, right? But what I want to pay attention to is the application of those principles, and really honing a set of criteria that we can look in the rearview mirror and say that they've been applied evenly and fairly, right? So we won't know that until we try to apply them and we make some judgments and we send people back to the drawing board for some feedback, right, in order for them to come back and qualify as having met our standards.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
I think we will move this then to a future agenda item, and hopefully sometime mid-fall.
Sure.
Kathy?
Can I just ask a quick question,
Sure.
Mark, on this? So at the moment, when you, or as you go forward and you go out to solicit businesses to take part in this, you're following at this point the athletic sponsorship district guidelines? Or?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in one of them, in A, towards the bottom, in parentheses, it says a restaurant may not use in its advertising text the word bar, pub, or tavern. So,
Right.
so.
We talked about that, right? And I think the rationale at this point was just to use a Michael Owens, to set the bar very low, right? To avoid any potential for controversy, trying to get out of the gate. The problem that immediately arises is that there are people who own establishments in the community that sell alcohol that are very good friends of the school districts, right? And offer their help and support and solicitation on any number of fronts. And so what I would pitch to them is that they see this as phase one, right? And we're going to try to work our way through, in a conservative fashion, the application of those principles, with some expectation that over time that perhaps we get better at this and we learn how to navigate that tension. But at the outset, I think I'm okay with that, right? And I would spend my time trying to convince people who wouldn't be okay with that that's a good conservative place to be at the outset, since we've never done this before.
Okay, thank you.
Seems like you have another question.
No, I have a thought about it, but I do understand what you're saying, although I'm thinking about, one local establishment in particular, which is a totally family restaurant where elementary school kids go, and
Right.
the owners are tremendous friends of the school kids.
Sure, and so I guess I haven't been in this conversation since the spring, but one thing I would recommend is that there's ways to pitch their establishment without a reference to the fact that.
That's in their name?
Right, but so I think what you just read is avoidance to references.
Yes. Okay, so they can use their name.
So, see, this is my point. So it's in the application that some thorny issues arise. So if you could imagine an establishment in town that served alcohol, but there was simply no reference to that in the name, would that satisfy the conservative standard that we want to set? We want to go slow and coming out. Right. I could come back to you and make that case, right? But I would at least want to have the option to be conservative.
Any other comments or questions? Mark, thank you. And, have a good school year.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. See you bright and early.
We will
Just put it on the chair.
put this on the agenda for future
Shut it off.
consideration.
There you
And I want to move on to the calendar, and I believe the superintendent has a handout.
Yeah, it's a brief handout just so that people can see where we are in the structure of, I think you've seen, you probably saw an earlier revision of this. We tried to space out the reports that we anticipate bringing in front of the committee. And I really just I sent this out again to the principals and directors to ask them to take a look at this, to really make revisions. So I should be hearing back from them shortly, probably in the next week or so, once we have students in our doors and in classrooms and school years underway. But I also wanted just to have the committee to take this back to see if there are topics that are missing or the timeline doesn't make sense, so that the committee can have a discussion. Our goal, one of the goals, was to really be thoughtful around the work cycle for staff, so that we were able to provide, full information to people in advance of the conversations, and that we're not kind of sprinting to keep up, so that way you get what you need to make decisions. There were a couple other topics, just so that people know up front, we're looking at where are we going to insert the curriculum updates and those sorts of things. So that's part of the discussion. So if you don't see that referenced fully, please don't worry. We did make a few adjustments based on conversation with the chairs, and did discuss these in Amherst recently and Pelham, I believe. That we will be, on the 25th of September is when we plan to present the district improvement plan. So I just wanted to call your attention to that. That is a joint meeting. And our goal this year, after discussion with the leadership team, was to present some foundational information of how did we walk into or begin to create a district improvement plan, and then to walk through that plan, and at each goal, to be able to then reference how that is being addressed in each school improvement plan. So to really present a much more cohesive presentation of district and school. So we'll see how that goes, but that will be the plan for the only topic for that night in September. We also are determining, I think I put down October 23rd as the conversation for two topics, which we really need to kind of think about if we can handle both in that, on that evening, for the later start time discussion and the superintendent evaluation process. We probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I started renewing the conversation with Ron Bohanowitz, specifically around transportation needs and costs of different scenarios of later start time, and Rich Farrow, our athletic director, around the effects of the different start times on athletics. And we really wanted to make sure that we really came back to the committee with full information, so that wherever we landed, the committee felt comfortable that they had all the pieces that they needed. I've tasked them with looking at the two scenarios at this moment, which is, the flip and move, which would be at the start time of approximately 9 o'clock for the secondary schools. And there's a lot of information that was requested months ago by Michael, and that we discussed at the committee, which is very detailed in terms of the effects or the potential effect on athletics, and then some comparison of the demographic groups that are affected by the athletic potential, reducing of teams, if that's where we went. Also the comparison of our teams and the number of teams we have to other school districts. So we have a substantial amount of information that is being gathered around the athletic question. And then I also asked Ron Bohanowitz to try to look at how tightly that cost was for that start time, as well as if we were to start between the hours of 8 and 8:30 for all of our schools. And we looked at different configurations of transportation. I said to be as creative as he could with thinking of different scenarios. So that could be picking up students for a start time in Leverett, Tewksbury, and Pelham for 8 o'clock, and then having maybe a start time for Amherst and the regional schools at 8:30. I wanted everything on the table and show me what that would look like, to the point of what if students shared the buses K through 12 with bus monitors? What would that look like for cost, timing? So we have a substantial amount of information that's coming back. I've asked the three chairs to, and Michael to join, because he asked many of these questions, to join us on, I believe it's October 4th. Is it October 6th?
It's the first week.
6th. It's first week of October, to really look at all of the information and compile that information in a way that would be user-friendly for the committee to look at. And we would plan to have that information out to the committee 2 weeks in advance of this discussion.
Great.
So I say all of that just to say that I feel like we had some missteps here and there with providing information, and we probably were not presenting in a way that was helpful for the committee. So I really want to make sure you have it all in front of you so that it's very objective and you can make the decision that you feel is best for our students. So that is scheduled for the discussion on, what did I say, October 23rd. And given, and thank you for having some people join in the evaluation subcommittee, because what we want to start to do is to have school committee members sit and start to learn more about the evaluation system for the superintendent, which is connected to the administrators and the teacher evaluation system. So we're going to start that work now, and we will be prepared for that time in October for the committee to really see that system, to know it well, and then to be able to, put a plan in place with me for my evaluation. I think those were the two major areas I think that it was important to kind of show some adjustment in our time frame.
Michael Shabazz and then Rick.
Just appreciating the time, I'll be quick. I think at the beginning where you just sort of asked, is it feasible to do those three topics on the 23rd? And having lived through the spring or summer when we had two really hefty conversations, I fear that we might give something some short shrift. So my alarm lights are going off like that's too much. And it seems like late start should get prioritized since it's picking up from the spring, and I don't know what that means for juggling. The other two quick things is, just to be clear in terms of our expectation, because I think last time we weren't clear about the presentation of discussion and having discussion versus a vote, and if we were going to be expected to vote on the 23rd, being clear about that ahead of time, otherwise we'd go into November, and this elementary schools have to decide, so there's an impact there. And then the third thought, which, I don't know, maybe it's never happened before, but it seems like if we're having a joint discussion and having the elementary schools, Pelham and Amherst involved, minimally, I think Shutesbury and Leverett should, formally be invited to listen, hear the conversation out of the horse's mouth, so to speak, so that it doesn't get reinterpreted. I don't know if we ever had actually a joint meeting, but minimally, we should invite them. And it'd be worth thinking about the joint meeting if that's manageable, but at least getting everyone in the room at the same time.
Thank you.
That's great.
Shabazz?
So, items for future, one is we've launched, or about to launch, a very significant change in our approach to the school's involvement in our students' out-of-school time. Have in mind the after-school program. I pose it to you to think about an appropriate time where you might, give us an update on how that seems to be going, whether some benchmarks have been met, or if there anything measurable you can bring forward, but that's one area.
Okay.
And the other is, I'm just throwing it out, I'll hopefully as I get involved with the budget committee work, I may have most of my concerns addressed there, but I am concerned, particularly after things were voted around expanding changing our legal representation because of the person we had in place for some of that legal work wanted a change, as it were. I'm just in general wondering how much are we spending on legal representation, and whether what we have in place now, what we're doing, who's doing what, is really the most cost-effective way to go on that, and what's maybe driving some need for change in that area.
Rick?
Thank you.
Hey, yeah, I think the September 25th meeting's just got too much in it when I think about it, because that's district improvement plan and school improvement plans for high school and middle school and for 4 elementary schools. So I don't know, I would recommend moving the elementary schools out of there or something, but.
I'm going to take a look at the time factor of how long it's going to take us, because we're going to plan, if we come, if I can speak to it, I'm sorry, I'm jumping right in. If we start planning and it feels like we're not bringing it to a place where the presentation and the questions, it's like really becoming excessive, we can split it into 2. But I think the presentation and making the connections within the presentation might be helpful. And then we may need to just say that there's some more substantial follow-up in others. But again, I'll be really conscious of how much time that takes, and if it's starting to be kind of a nightmare meeting, I will adjust that plan.
Rob?
A couple items for future agenda, and this speaks a little to curriculum, which we say we may add in, but I would like some time at a future meeting to talk about the high school math program and go over some of the questions. I thought Ms. Jensen brought up some good ones. I have some other ones and some requests for data on that too that I can send by email to the chairs and the superintendent, but I would like to be able to talk about that and ask those questions. And then I would like an update, if we could, on the science evaluation that was going on through Policy IL, because I haven't heard about that for a little while.
Yes.
Any other questions, future agenda items? I just have one personal request, that the September 25th meeting be rescheduled. It's the first night of Yom Kippur.
Okay, absolutely.
Monday would be good, or Wednesday, but Tuesday, well, even Wednesday's not great. Monday's okay.
So Monday, so we're gonna we'll reach out to the committee to find another date that might work, okay? And I know that might be challenging, but we'll figure that out together.
Thank
I'll
you.
have Debbie kind of reach out to everyone. Thank you, Kip.
Are there any other items that members of the committee would like to put forth? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Rob,
I move to adjourn.
second?
Second.
Motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. No discussion, right? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned at
Excellent.
8:45.
Very good.
Thank
Thank you
folks.
all.
Thank you.